Clean that up properly, or I'll dock your pay for the whole month." Claudia Ashford's voice sliced through the charity luncheon's chatter as she gestured at a single drop of champagne on the marble floor. The afternoon sun streamed through the ballroom's crystal windows, illuminating 50 of the city's wealthiest donors who turned to watch the spectacle. Amara Foster knelt slowly, her red cleaning uniform crisp under the natural light, but her movements deliberate and controlled. "You people never learn to be careful, do you?" Claudia Ashford continued, her designer white dress rustling as she stepped closer. The other guests murmured approval, phones discreetly recording what they thought was just another entitled socialite, putting help in their place. Amara Foster's hands remained steady as she cleaned, while Claudia Ashford had no idea she was humiliating a federal agent who'd been gathering evidence on her tax evasion for months. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Amara Foster pressed the cleaning cloth against the marble, watching the microscopic champagne stain disappear. Around her, the ballroom buzzed with the quiet satisfaction of wealthy spectators witnessing what they believed was proper hierarchy being maintained. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across designer gowns and tailored suits, while the scent of expensive perfume mixed with catered delicacies filled the air. The Ashford Foundation's annual charity luncheon was the social event of the season, where the city's elite gathered to write checks and feel virtuous about their tax-deductible generosity. "That's still not clean enough," Claudia Ashford announced, her voice carrying across the ballroom with theatrical projection. "Do it again. Properly this time." Amara Foster looked up briefly, meeting Claudia Ashford's cold blue eyes. The woman stood with perfect posture, her platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her white designer dress, custom made and flawless, seemed to glow under the natural daylight streaming through the massive windows. Diamond earrings caught the light as she tilted her head, studying Amara Foster like an entomologist, examining an interesting specimen. "Of course, Mrs. Ashford," Amara Foster replied, her voice steady and professional. She began cleaning the same spot again, though it had been spotless for the past 2 minutes. The assembled donors watched with varying degrees of amusement and approval. Eleanor Whitfield, resplendent in a red silk gown, leaned toward her companion and whispered something that made them both laugh. Several guests had their phones out, recording what they assumed was spontaneous entertainment. The irony wasn't lost on Amara Foster, that these people were documenting their own complicity in what they perceived as justified cruelty. "You see, everyone," Claudia Ashford addressed her audience, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "This is exactly what I was telling you about earlier. These people," she gestured dismissively at Amara Foster, "they simply don't understand quality or standards. You give them work, and they think they can do the bare minimum." Amara Foster's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as she continued her performance. 3 months of this treatment had tested every ounce of her professional training and personal restraint. Every morning, she reminded herself why she was here, why she endured Claudia Ashford's escalating cruelty. The small recording device sewn into her uniform's collar captured every word, every casual admission of the illegal activities that had brought federal attention to the Ashford family. "I pay good money for proper service," Claudia Ashford continued, warming to her theme. "But you have to manage them constantly. Just last week, I caught her trying to steal food from our kitchen." "Didn't you?" she asked, looking down at Amara Foster with mock concern. The accusation was completely false, and they both knew it. Amara Foster had been photographing financial documents hidden in James Ashford's home office when Claudia Ashford discovered her in the kitchen afterward. Rather than explaining her real purpose, Amara Foster had allowed the woman to believe she was stealing food. It had been a calculated decision that maintained her cover while providing Claudia Ashford with ammunition for future humiliations. "I was hungry, Mrs. Ashford," Amara Foster said quietly, playing her role perfectly. "I apologize." "Hungry," Claudia Ashford repeated with exaggerated sympathy. "Well, you should have thought about that before taking a job you're not qualified for." She turned back to her audience. "You see how they always have excuses? No personal responsibility whatsoever." The wealthy donors nodded sagely, their faces reflecting the comfortable superiority that came with never having experienced genuine hunger or desperation. James Ashford stood near the buffet table in his orange polo shirt and navy slacks, watching his wife's performance with the detached interest of someone observing a familiar routine. He never intervened, never objected, never showed the slightest discomfort with his wife's treatment of their staff. "Stand up," Claudia Ashford commanded. "Let everyone see you properly." Amara Foster rose slowly, her red uniform and black shoes creating a stark contrast against the marble floor. She stood with quiet dignity, her dark skin glowing under the natural light, her expression carefully neutral. Around the room, she could feel the weight of 50 pairs of eyes evaluating her, measuring her, finding her wanting according to their predetermined standards. "Turn around," Claudia Ashford instructed, as if Amara Foster were livestock at auction. "Show everyone what proper cleaning staff should look like when they're actually trying." The humiliation was designed to be complete, public, and memorable. Amara Foster turned slowly, maintaining perfect posture while Claudia Ashford provided commentary on her appearance, her perceived inadequacies, and the general worthlessness of people in her position. The recording device captured every word, every cruel observation, every calculated moment of degradation. "Now I want you to clean this entire area again," Claudia Ashford announced, gesturing at a section of floor that was already immaculate. "Start from the corner and work your way across. And this time, make sure you do it right the first time." As Amara Foster knelt and began her unnecessary task, Claudia Ashford turned back to her captivated audience. "You know, managing household staff is exactly like managing investments," she said with casual confidence. "You have to watch them constantly, or they'll try to take advantage of you. Just like we were discussing earlier about those offshore accounts. Everything requires proper oversight to ensure maximum efficiency and minimal tax burden." Several donors chuckled appreciatively at what they assumed was harmless financial planning discussion. Eleanor Whitfield nodded knowingly, her red dress shimmering as she shifted position. The casual mention of offshore accounts sent a thrill of satisfaction through Amara Foster. After months of careful investigation, Claudia Ashford was providing exactly the kind of spontaneous confession that would be devastating in federal court. The natural daylight streaming through the crystal windows created perfect lighting conditions for the hidden camera equipment Amara Foster carried. Every expression, every gesture, every moment of calculated cruelty was being documented with crystal clarity. The wealthy donors recording on their phones had no idea they were creating additional evidence for federal prosecutors. "I've been telling my friends that proper domestic management is an art form," Claudia Ashford continued, clearly enjoying her audience's attention. "You establish clear hierarchies, maintain absolute control, and never let them forget their place. It's the same principle we apply to everything, really. Taxes, investments, charitable contributions. You find the loopholes, you exploit the weaknesses in the system, and you make sure you're never the one being taken advantage of." Amara Foster's movements remained steady and methodical as she cleaned the pristine floor. Inside, her mind was racing with the implications of what Claudia Ashford was revealing. The woman's arrogance was making her careless, her need to impress her wealthy friends overriding basic caution. She was connecting her treatment of staff to her illegal financial activities in ways that would be impossible to explain away later. "You see how she works when she's being supervised properly?" Claudia Ashford asked her audience, gesturing at Amara Foster. "This is what happens when you maintain appropriate standards and don't accept excuses." The approval from the crowd was immediate and enthusiastic. These people saw nothing wrong with public humiliation as a management technique. Their phones continued recording, capturing their own laughter and commentary for posterity. The irony was beautiful in its completeness, Amara Foster thought. They were enthusiastically documenting their own moral bankruptcy. Now Claudia Ashford announced with theatrical flair, "I want everyone to see what happens when you try to take shortcuts with these people." She pulled a white cloth from her purse and dropped it on the floor. Amara Foster had just finished cleaning. "Clean that up. And this time, I want you to thank me for giving you the opportunity to do your job correctly." The crowd leaned forward slightly, anticipating another moment of entertainment. Amara Foster picked up the cloth slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Thank you for helping me improve, Mrs. Ashford," she said clearly, her voice carrying just enough volume for the recording equipment to capture every word. "Perfect," Claudia Ashford said with satisfaction. "You see, everyone? Proper training yields proper results. Whether it's managing staff, managing investments, or managing tax obligations, the key is never accepting the first answer you're given. You push, you demand better, and eventually you get the results you deserve." As the wealthy donors applauded what they perceived as a masterful display of household management, Amara Foster straightened slowly. The recording device had captured everything. Months of careful investigation, documentation, and endured abuse were finally yielding the evidence that would bring down not just Claudia Ashford, but the entire network of wealthy tax evaders she represented. The natural light streaming through the ballroom's crystal windows illuminated the scene with perfect clarity, creating an almost cinematic quality to the moment. 50 of the city's wealthiest and most influential people had just witnessed and recorded a federal agent being systematically humiliated while gathering evidence against the very woman orchestrating the abuse. Claudia Ashford had no idea that her perfect performance was about to become the centerpiece of a federal prosecution that would destroy everything she held dear. And Amara Foster, standing quietly in her red uniform while the crowd's laughter echoed around her, allowed herself the smallest smile as she mentally added another crucial piece of evidence to the case that would finally deliver justice. 3 months earlier, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the federal building downtown, casting sharp rectangles of light across the polished floors. Agent Amara Foster walked through the corridors with purposeful steps, her black heels clicking against the marble as she made her way to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed steadily, bathing everything in that familiar institutional brightness that seemed to make secrets impossible to hide. She pushed open the door to Conference Room B, where Agent Daniel Park was already waiting. He stood at the head of a long table covered in manila folders, financial documents, and surveillance photographs. His green-collared shirt was crisp and professional beneath his navy blue jacket, and his expression carried the weight of someone about to reveal a case that had consumed months of his life. "Amara, thank you for coming in early," Daniel said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "What I'm about to show you is going to change everything about how we approach white-collar crime in this city." Amara settled into her chair, her trained eyes already scanning the materials spread before her. Bank statements with astronomical figures, photographs of luxury properties, and what appeared to be charity organization documents filled her field of vision. At the center of it all was a professional headshot of a woman with platinum blonde hair and cold blue eyes, Claudia Ashford. "Tell me about Operation Clean Sweep," Amara said, her voice steady and professional. Daniel picked up a thick file and opened it. "The Ashford family owns half the commercial real estate in this city. James Ashford inherited his father's construction empire, but it's his wife Claudia who runs their financial operations. On paper, they're model citizens, major charity donors, community leaders, the works. But our forensic accountants have identified discrepancies that suggest they're hiding somewhere between $50 and $70 million in offshore accounts." He slid a series of bank statements across the table. Amara studied them carefully, her financial crimes training immediately identifying the irregular patterns: deposits that didn't match reported income, transfers to shell companies in the Cayman Islands, and charity donations that seemed to circle back through a network of suspicious organizations. "How long have you been tracking this?" she asked. 18 months. We've tried traditional surveillance, financial audits, even attempted to flip some of their business associates. But they're insulated by layers of attorneys and accountants who know exactly how to navigate the system. Every time we get close, their legal team shuts us down with injunctions and privacy claims. The morning light shifted slightly, and Amara noticed additional files stacked on the side table. This investigation was clearly massive in scope, the kind that could make or break careers in federal law enforcement. "What makes you think an undercover operation will succeed where traditional methods failed?" she asked. Daniel's expression grew more intense. "Because Claudia Ashford has a weakness that her lawyers can't protect her from: her own mouth. She's arrogant, cruel, and she loves to brag about how much smarter she is than everyone around her, particularly to people she considers beneath her notice." He opened another file, this one containing what appeared to be employment records and incident reports. She goes through domestic staff like tissues, housekeepers, gardeners, personal assistants. They all quit within months, sometimes weeks. The few who've been willing to talk describe a pattern of verbal abuse, impossible demands, and deliberate humiliation. Amara felt something stir inside her chest. A familiar anger that had driven her to specialize in cases involving the abuse of power. She'd grown up watching wealthy families in her neighborhood treat service workers like invisible furniture, and it had shaped her entire career trajectory. "You need someone who can get close to her," Amara said. "Someone she'll underestimate." Exactly. Someone with your background in financial crimes who can recognize evidence when they see it, but who she'll dismiss as just another piece of help to abuse. Daniel leaned forward. "Amara, your record in undercover operations is exceptional. You've maintained cover in drug cartels, organized crime families, and corporate fraud rings. But this case is different. The psychological abuse you'll endure could be unlike anything you've experienced." The door opened, and Detective Lisa Monroe entered. She wore her blue police uniform with long sleeves, her badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Her expression was serious as she approached the table. "Sorry I'm late," Lisa said, settling into a chair beside Daniel. "I was finishing up interviews with 3 more former Ashford employees." Daniel nodded to her. "Lisa has been coordinating with local police on the character assassination aspects of this case. Tell her what you found." Lisa opened her own file, revealing photographs of several women of various ethnicities, all looking tired and defeated. In the past 2 years, Claudia Ashford has employed 12 different housekeepers. 12. The average tenure is 6 weeks. The stories they tell are remarkably consistent. Systematic humiliation, impossible standards, verbal abuse that escalates to psychological torture. She pulled out a particular photograph of a middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes and calloused hands. "This is Rosa Delgado. She lasted 4 months, longer than most. Claudia Ashford fired her after she accidentally overheard a phone conversation about moving money to overseas accounts. Rosa was too scared to come forward initially, but she's agreed to provide background information for our operation." Amara studied Rosa's photograph, seeing in her face the weariness of someone who had endured systematic cruelty simply for trying to earn an honest living. The anger in her chest grew stronger. "What's the legal framework for this operation?" Amara asked. Daniel pulled out a document bearing federal seals and multiple signatures. "We have approval from the Attorney General's office for a deep cover operation lasting up to 6 months. You'll be equipped with state-of-the-art recording devices disguised as common personal items. Everything Claudia Ashford says to you, around you, or about her financial activities will be documented and admissible in court." "There's more," Lisa added. "We have a cooperative witness inside their organization. Gerald Hoffman has been the Ashford family accountant for 8 years. He approached us 6 months ago after witnessing James Ashford meet with known money launderers in his office." She produced a photograph of a nervous-looking man in his 50s with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Hoffman has been copying financial documents and recording conversations, but he doesn't have access to Claudia's personal activities. That's where you come in." Daniel spread out building blueprints of the Ashford mansion. The house has 43 rooms across 3 floors, plus a basement wine cellar and safe room. Hoffman has identified James's home office, Claudia's personal study, and their private safe as the most likely locations for physical evidence. Amara examined the blueprints, already visualizing how she would navigate the space while maintaining her cover. "What about my background story? You'll be Amara Foster, recently moved to the city from Atlanta after a divorce. You need work immediately and have experience in hotel housekeeping. Rosa Delgado will recommend you as her replacement, giving you credibility." Daniel handed her a complete identity packet. "You have references from hotels that are actually federal safe houses, and a backstory that explains why you need the job desperately enough to tolerate Claudia's abuse." The weight of the operation began to settle on Amara's shoulders. Months of enduring systematic cruelty while gathering evidence that could bring down a network of wealthy criminals. The professional challenge excited her, but the personal cost would be significant. "I need to understand something," Amara said. "This isn't just about tax evasion, is it? You're building a case that goes beyond financial crimes. Lisa nodded grimly. Claudia Ashford represents everything wrong with how wealth insulates people from consequences. She's abused dozens of employees, stolen millions from taxpayers, and used her status to destroy anyone who threatens her. This case is about proving that no one is above the law. Daniel gathered the files into neat stacks. Amara, I need you to know what you're signing up for. Claudia Ashford will try to break you psychologically. She'll attack your dignity, your intelligence, your worth as a human being. She'll do everything in her power to make you quit or react in a way that compromises the investigation. Amara stood up, feeling the full weight of her decision settling into place. 3 months of abuse lay ahead of her. 3 months of being treated like property, while she gathered the evidence that would bring justice to Rosa Delgado and countless other victims. When do I start? She asked. Daniel smiled for the first time that morning. Rosa has already called Claudia about a replacement. You have an interview tomorrow at 10 a.m. As Amara walked back through the bright corridors of the federal building, she thought about all the cases that had led her to this moment. Every corrupt executive she'd helped convict, every financial crime she'd unraveled, every time she'd stood up to power and won. Claudia Ashford had no idea what was coming for her. The morning sun was now fully overhead, streaming through the building's skylights and casting everything in sharp, clear light. In less than 24 hours, Amara would walk into the Ashford mansion and begin the most important performance of her career. She would endure whatever Claudia Ashford could dish out, gather the evidence that would destroy her. Justice was patient. Justice was methodical. And justice was about to knock on Claudia Ashford's door, wearing a housekeeper's uniform and carrying a badge she'd never see coming. The wrought iron gates of the Ashford estate loomed before Amara Foster, like the entrance to another world. As her modest sedan wound up the pristine cobblestone driveway, she caught her first glimpse of the mansion that would be her workplace and prison for the next several months. The 3-story colonial structure sprawled across manicured grounds, its white marble columns gleaming in the morning sunlight, streaming through towering oak trees. Crystal clear skylights dotted the slate roof, promising the kind of natural illumination that would serve her hidden recording equipment perfectly. Amara adjusted her red cleaning uniform one final time, the polyester fabric feeling foreign against her skin. After years of professional suits and federal badges, the matching red polo shirt and navy work pants were carefully chosen to blend with the household staff. But she knew they also marked her as invisible to people like the Ashfords. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she parked in the designated staff area, months of preparation culminating in this single moment. The service entrance led through a mudroom that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Italian marble tiles reflected the overhead fluorescent lighting, while built-in lockers, crafted from Brazilian rosewood, awaited the staff's belongings. Amara stored her purse, ensuring the hidden recording device remained active and concealed beneath her uniform collar. You must be the new girl. The voice cut through the air like a blade wrapped in silk. Claudia Ashford stood in the doorway connecting the mudroom to the main house, her presence immediately commanding attention. She wore a crimson-red designer blouse over tailored white slacks, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe chignon that accentuated her sharp cheekbones and cold blue eyes. Everything about her screamed wealth and entitlement, from her diamond tennis bracelet to her perfectly manicured nails. Yes, ma'am, I'm Amara Foster. I'm here to replace Rosa Delgado. Amara kept her voice humble and deferential, channeling months of character preparation. Rosa quit because she couldn't handle real work. Claudia's voice dripped with disdain as she circled Amara like a predator evaluating prey. I hope you're not planning to be another disappointment. I have very specific standards, and I don't tolerate laziness, incompetence, or attitude. Do we understand each other? The immediate hostility shocked Amara. Though she maintained her composed exterior, Agent Daniel Park had warned her about Claudia's reputation. But experiencing the woman's cruelty firsthand felt like being slapped. Yes, ma'am, I understand completely. We'll see. Claudia's laugh held no warmth. Your first task is cleaning the main living areas. I want every surface spotless, every piece of furniture dusted, and every floor polished to perfection. You have 2 hours. Amara followed Claudia through the mansion's main hallway, her trained eye automatically cataloging potential hiding spots for financial documents while appearing to focus on cleaning instructions. The natural light pouring through the skylights created perfect conditions for her surveillance equipment, illuminating oil paintings worth more than federal agents earned in a lifetime. The living room alone could have housed 3 average families. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of manicured gardens, while a marble fireplace dominated one wall beneath a chandelier that probably cost 6 figures. Persian rugs covered hardwood floors that gleamed like mirrors, and leather furniture arranged in perfect symmetry suggested professional interior design. "I'll be checking your work in exactly 2 hours," Claudia announced, her red blouse catching the overhead light as she gestured dismissively. "If anything fails to meet my standards, you'll start over until it's acceptable." James Ashford emerged from what appeared to be a home office, wearing an orange polo shirt and navy slacks that marked him as casually wealthy rather than formally dressed. His thinning brown hair and soft physique suggested a man more comfortable behind a desk than anywhere requiring physical effort. Where his wife radiated aggressive energy, James seemed content to fade into the background. "Claudia, perhaps you could show her where the supplies are kept," he suggested mildly, his tone carefully neutral. "She can figure it out herself. I'm not running a training academy." Claudia's response carried an edge that made James visibly retreat. Good help should require minimal supervision. The interaction revealed the household dynamics immediately. James enabled his wife's behavior through strategic silence, choosing comfort over confrontation. Amara filed this observation away as potentially useful intelligence while locating cleaning supplies in a utility room that rivaled most people's kitchens. As she began dusting the endless surfaces, Amara's training kicked in. Every movement served dual purposes, cleaning genuinely while systematically searching for anything related to the family's finances. Her methodical approach to intelligence gathering had made her one of the IRS's most successful undercover agents, though Claudia clearly assumed she was dealing with someone of limited intelligence and ambition. The hidden recording device captured everything: Claudia's casual cruelty, James's enabling silence, and most importantly, any conversations about their financial dealings. The federal prosecutors would need character evidence to support the criminal charges, and Claudia was providing it in abundance. "What are you doing?" Claudia's voice cracked like a whip from the doorway. She'd returned early, clearly hoping to catch Amara making mistakes. "Dusting the bookshelf, ma'am." Amara held up her cleaning cloth as evidence, though she'd actually been photographing the titles of financial books and investment guides that might indicate sophisticated tax avoidance knowledge. That shelf was already clean. "Are you trying to waste time and cleaning supplies?" Claudia advanced into the room, her red blouse seeming to intensify under the natural lighting. "I specifically told you to focus on surfaces that actually needed attention." The accusation was completely false. But Amara recognized the power play. Claudia needed to establish dominance through manufactured grievances, creating a hostile work environment that would keep staff defensive and compliant. "I apologize, ma'am. I'll focus on the areas that need more attention." "See that you do. I don't pay people to pretend to work." The morning progressed with similar interactions. Every room brought new criticism, new impossible standards, and new evidence of Claudia's systematic cruelty. By lunchtime, Amara had documented extensive character evidence while identifying several potential locations for financial documents. Her breakthrough came when Claudia sent her to clean James's home office. The room screamed masculine wealth, from the leather-bound law books to the mahogany desk that dominated the space. Natural light from overhead skylights created perfect conditions for photographing documents, though she'd need to be careful about timing. James had left several files partially visible on his desk, either through carelessness or arrogance. Amara's trained eye immediately identified bank statements, investment records, and what appeared to be correspondence with offshore financial institutions. Her heart raced as she realized the intelligence value of what she was seeing, but her hands remained steady as she dusted around the papers while photographing everything. The doorbell interrupted her documentation efforts. Through the office window, she watched a silver Mercedes pull up to the front entrance. A woman in an expensive red blazer emerged, her movements suggesting the same entitled confidence that characterized Claudia. "Eleanor." Claudia's voice carried through the mansion as she greeted her visitor. "Perfect timing. I was just telling James we needed to discuss our Cayman arrangements." Amara's pulse quickened. The Cayman Islands reference aligned perfectly with the intelligence Daniel Park had shared during her briefing. She positioned herself to continue cleaning while remaining close enough for her recording equipment to capture the conversation. Eleanor Whitfield proved to be everything Agent Park's files had suggested. Wealthy, connected, and apparently as casual about tax evasion as most people were about jaywalking. She wore her red blazer like armor, her gray hair styled in an expensive cut that probably cost more than minimum wage workers earned in a week. "Has Gerald finished restructuring the charitable foundation accounts?" Eleanor asked, as they settled in the living room adjacent to the office where Amara worked. "Everything's been moved through the proper channels," James replied, his orange shirt visible through the doorway as he joined the women. "The paper trail leads exactly where we want it to lead." Amara continued dusting, her movements automatic while her mind raced. Gerald had to be Gerald Hoffman, the family accountant Daniel Park had mentioned as a potential weak link in their operation. The charitable foundation reference suggested sophisticated fraud involving tax-exempt organizations. "Excellent. The beauty of these arrangements is their complete legality on paper." Claudia laughed, the sound sharp and predatory. "Let the government investigate all they want. They'll find properly filed paperwork and legitimate business expenses." "What about the new housekeeper?" Eleanor nodded toward Amara's general direction. "Can we speak freely? Please. She's just like all the others. They hear what they want to hear, which is their paycheck amount and their work schedule. Everything else might as well be in a foreign language." The casual dismissal of her intelligence and awareness stung, but Amara recognized it as exactly the kind of arrogance that brought down criminal enterprises. Wealthy suspects consistently underestimated federal agents, law enforcement capabilities, and the legal consequences of their actions. For the next hour, she listened to detailed discussions of tax avoidance strategies, offshore account management, and charitable fraud schemes. Her recording equipment captured every word while she maintained perfect invisibility, dusting and polishing, while three wealthy criminals discussed financial crimes in casual, comfortable detail. The conversation revealed a network of wealthy families coordinating their tax evasion efforts through shared accountants, lawyers, and offshore institutions. Eleanor mentioned at least 6 other families involved in similar schemes, providing the IRS with intelligence that could expand their investigation exponentially. "The key is maintaining the proper appearances," James explained, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. "Charitable donations, business expenses, investment losses, everything properly documented and completely legal on its face. While the real money sits safely beyond American tax jurisdiction," Claudia added with obvious satisfaction. Amara's anger grew with each casual admission of criminal activity. These people stole from every honest taxpayer in the country while treating their crimes like elaborate games. Their wealth insulated them from consequences that would destroy ordinary citizens, creating a sense of invulnerability that bordered on sociopathic. "I should return some of these files to the safe," James announced, gathering papers from his desk. Amara's blood turned to ice as she realized her presence in his office would soon be discovered. She'd been so focused on the intelligence opportunity that she'd lost track of time and positioning. The phone rang before James could enter the office, its shrill tone cutting through the afternoon air like an alarm. "Ashford Residence," Claudia answered with practiced elegance. "Yes, this is about the Cayman accounts." "Hold on." Claudia covered the phone's mouthpiece with her hand. "Eleanor, James, I need to take this privately. Could you give me a moment?" Amara seized the opportunity to slip out of the office and into the hallway, her heart pounding as she realized how close she'd come to exposure. Her training had prepared her for dangerous situations, but maintaining cover while gathering intelligence required constant vigilance and perfect timing. "What do you mean there's a problem with the transfers?" Claudia's voice carried clearly from the living room, though she'd obviously intended the conversation to remain private. Amara positioned herself to dust a hallway table while remaining within range of her recording equipment. The phone conversation promised to provide crucial intelligence about the family's offshore financial activities. No, absolutely not. Those accounts are completely secure and properly structured. If someone's asking questions, they don't have the authority or jurisdiction to access our information. The conversation continued with increasingly specific details about account numbers, transfer amounts, and legal strategies for avoiding American tax obligations. Amara's equipment captured every word while she maintained her cleaning routine, though her excitement about the intelligence value made it difficult to appear disinterested. Fine, schedule a meeting with the lawyers for next week. We'll review everything and make sure our protection remains absolute. As Claudia ended the phone call, she noticed Amara cleaning in the hallway. Her expression shifted from business concern to volcanic rage in the space of a heartbeat. How long have you been standing there? The question cracked through the air like a gunshot, carrying threat and suspicion in equal measure. I've been cleaning this area for about 10 minutes, ma'am, Amara replied honestly, though she omitted mentioning her excellent hearing and recording equipment. Did you hear my phone conversation? I heard you talking, but I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying. I was focused on my work. Claudia advanced toward her, red blouse blazing under the natural lighting, her face contorted with fury that seemed disproportionate to the situation. Let me make something crystal clear. You are here to clean, nothing else. You don't listen to conversations. You don't repeat what you might overhear. And you certainly don't ask questions about things that are none of your business. Yes, ma'am. I understand completely. I hope you do. Because if I discover you've been eavesdropping or gossiping about this family's private affairs, you'll find yourself unemployed and unemployable faster than you can imagine. The threat carried genuine menace, revealing Claudia's paranoia about discovery and her willingness to destroy anyone she perceived as a threat. For someone supposedly engaged in completely legal financial activities, she displayed remarkable anxiety about potential witnesses. As Eleanor departed and James retreated to other parts of the mansion, Amara reflected on her first day's intelligence harvest. The recording equipment had captured dozens of incriminating statements, character evidence, and references to criminal associates. The investigation was off to an exceptional start, but the personal cost was already becoming apparent. Claudia's cruelty wasn't simply professional indifference or class-based dismissal. It was active, creative hostility designed to intimidate and degrade anyone she perceived as beneath her station. The months ahead would test every aspect of Amara's training, endurance, and commitment to justice. But as she finished her cleaning duties under Claudia's watchful glare, she reminded herself that every moment of abuse was being documented, every crime was being recorded, and every display of arrogance was building the case that would eventually bring this entire network of wealthy criminals to justice. The first day in hell was complete, but Amara Foster was just getting started. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the federal building, casting bright rectangles of light across Agent Daniel Park's desk. 2 months had passed since Amara Foster first walked through the Ashford Mansion's gilded doors, and the evidence she'd gathered painted a picture far more damaging than anyone had initially imagined. Daniel adjusted his green-collared shirt beneath his blue jacket as he spread the latest batch of photographs across his desk. Each image told a story of calculated deception that reached into the highest echelons of the city's social hierarchy. The overhead fluorescent lights illuminated bank statements, recorded conversations transcribed onto official letterhead, and photographs of documents that should have been locked away in the most secure vaults money could buy. The scope of this operation is staggering, Daniel said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 months' worth of discoveries. What we thought was simple tax evasion has turned into a network that spans 3 countries and involves over a dozen prominent families. Amara sat across from him, her red cleaning uniform replaced for this brief respite by a simple green top and navy slacks. The contrast felt jarring after weeks of maintaining her cover, but these weekly briefings had become her lifeline to sanity. The evidence folders before them represented not just financial crimes but a systematic pattern of abuse that made her blood boil even now in the safety of the government office. Detective Lisa Monroe entered the conference room, her short-sleeved blue police uniform crisp despite the early hour, She carried a stack of files that seemed to grow thicker with each passing week. The natural light from the skylight above caught the gold of her badge as she settled into her chair. Local PD has been coordinating with the Financial Crimes Unit, Lisa began, opening her files with practiced efficiency. The money laundering charges alone will put James Ashford away for decades. But what we're seeing from Amara's recording suggests something even more troubling. Amara's jaw tightened as she remembered yesterday's training session with Claudia Ashford. The woman's paranoia had reached new heights, manifesting in increasingly cruel treatment that went far beyond the verbal abuse of her early days in the mansion. Now Claudia demanded that Amara work 16-hour days without overtime pay, threatening to call immigration services despite knowing full well that Amara was American-born. "She's getting desperate," Amara said, her voice steady, despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. "Yesterday she cornered me in the kitchen and accused me of stealing a silver spoon that was in the dishwasher. When I showed her where it was, she made me rewash every piece of silverware in the house as punishment for talking back." Daniel's expression darkened as he reviewed the psychological evaluation reports. The abuse escalation suggests she suspects something. Not necessarily that you're federal law enforcement, but her instincts are telling her that something has changed in her carefully controlled world. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Claudia Ashford's increased paranoia was actually providing them with better evidence. Her need to assert control had led her to become more careless with her words, more explicit about her criminal activities, as if proving her power over Amara somehow validated her superiority in all aspects of her life. "There's something else," Amara continued, pulling out a small recording device that looked like an ordinary cleaning supply. "I made contact with Rosa Delgado, the housekeeper who worked there before me." Lisa leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad. "The one who quit suddenly 3 months ago?" "She didn't quit," Amara corrected, her voice carrying the weight of a disturbing discovery. "She was fired after accidentally walking in on a meeting between James Ashford and 2 men she later identified from police photos as Vincent Calabrese and Marcus Torino." Daniel's whistle was low and appreciative. "Money launderers with ties to organized crime. That elevates this from white-collar crime to RICO territory." The revelation had come during a chance encounter at a grocery store near the mansion. Rosa had recognized Amara's uniform and the haunted look that came from working under Claudia Ashford's increasingly erratic supervision. Over coffee, in a small diner filled with natural daylight streaming through clean windows, Rosa had shared her story. "She said James threatened her entire family," Amara continued. "Told her that if she ever spoke about what she'd seen, he'd make sure she was deported and her children would disappear into the foster system." The psychological manipulation was systematic, designed to keep her silent through terror. Lisa's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. "That's witness intimidation, conspiracy, and about 6 other federal charges we can add to the list. Rosa willing to testify?" "She's terrified. But yes, especially after I told her what I've been documenting. She wants other women to know they don't have to suffer in silence." The psychological toll of maintaining her cover while enduring daily humiliation was written in the tight lines around Amara's eyes, but her determination burned brighter with each passing day. Every insult Claudia hurled at her, every deliberate humiliation designed to break her spirit, only strengthened her resolve to see justice served. A knock on the conference room door interrupted their discussion. Gerald Hoffman entered, his nervous energy filling the bright space as he clutched a leather briefcase that had become synonymous with bombshell revelations. The whistleblower accountant had been the key to understanding the sophisticated financial structures that had hidden the Ashford family's crimes for years. "I have the Cayman Islands bank records," Gerald announced without preamble, his voice shaking slightly as he opened his briefcase. "The pattern is even more extensive than we realized." Daniel cleared space on the desk as Gerald spread out financial documents that told a story of greed and systematic theft from the American taxpayers. The overhead lights illuminated columns of numbers that represented millions of dollars in evaded taxes, hidden behind shell companies and charitable foundations that existed only on paper. "They've been using the charity luncheons as more than just social events," Gerald explained, pointing to specific transactions. Each event serves as a cover for money laundering operations. Wealthy donors make contributions that get filtered through fake charities, then cycled back to them as tax-free consulting fees. Amara studied the documents, remembering conversations she'd overheard while polishing furniture that Claudia Ashford treated as invisible. That explains why she's so obsessed with the upcoming charity luncheon. It's not just about social status, it's the culmination of this year's money laundering cycle. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. Claudia Ashford's increasing cruelty toward Amara wasn't just about asserting dominance over someone she perceived as inferior. It was about maintaining the psychological control that allowed her to believe herself above the law, untouchable in her ivory tower of wealth and social connections. Lisa looked up from her notes, her expression grim. How many people are we talking about? How deep does this network go? Gerald's hands shook as he pulled out another folder. Based on the financial records and cross-referencing with Amara's recordings, at least 47 prominent families are involved. The total amount of evaded taxes exceeds $50 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. $50 million that should have gone to schools, hospitals, infrastructure projects, and social programs. Instead, it had lined the pockets of people who already had more wealth than most Americans could imagine in their lifetimes. The charity luncheon isn't just a social event, Amara realized, her voice carrying the weight of revelation. It's their annual celebration of how successfully they've stolen from everyone else. Daniel nodded grimly, which makes it the perfect place to take them down. Public, documented, with all the major players in one location. But as the meeting wound down, and Amara prepared to return to her role as the abused housekeeper, the psychological cost of her mission weighed heavily on her shoulders. Each day brought fresh humiliations designed to break her spirit. Claudia Ashford seemed to take genuine pleasure in finding new ways to assert her perceived superiority, forcing Amara to clean the same surfaces repeatedly, berating her for imaginary mistakes, and subjecting her to verbal abuse that would have broken someone with less training and determination. The drive back to the mansion felt like a journey into enemy territory. As Amara changed back into her red cleaning uniform in the federal building's parking garage, she reminded herself why this mission mattered. Every woman who had suffered under the Ashfords' cruelty, every taxpayer who struggled to make ends meet while the wealthy evaded their responsibilities, every person who believed that justice was only for those who couldn't buy their way out of consequences, they all deserved better. The mansion loomed before her as she parked her modest car in the service area, its grandeur built on a foundation of theft and systematic abuse. But now, instead of feeling intimidated by its opulent facade, Amara saw it for what it truly was, evidence of crimes that would soon be exposed in the harsh light of federal prosecution. As she walked toward the servants' entrance, Amara's hidden recording device was already documenting her return. In just a few weeks, at the charity luncheon that represented the pinnacle of the Ashfords' criminal enterprise, all of this carefully gathered evidence would culminate in a reckoning that would shatter their world of privilege and impunity. The psychological toll was real. The daily abuse was degrading. But Amara's commitment to justice burned brighter with each passing day. Soon, very soon, Claudia Ashford would learn that the woman she'd been tormenting was actually the architect of her destruction. The crystal chandelier cast brilliant rays across the marble floor as Claudia Ashford's voice rang through the ballroom with theatrical authority. "Look at this mess you've made, Amara. Do you see how the champagne has stained my pristine floors?" She pointed dramatically at a microscopic droplet that had already been cleaned 3 times, her red Valentino dress shimmering under the natural skylight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Amara Foster knelt on the cold marble, her red cleaning uniform a stark contrast to the sea of designer gowns surrounding her. The hidden recording device sewn into her collar captured every word as 50 of the city's wealthiest donors watched with growing amusement. She scrubbed the already spotless floor with mechanical precision, her mind cataloging each cruel word for the federal case that would soon unfold. "Harder," Claudia commanded, her voice dripping with sadistic pleasure. "I want to see those hands work." This is what happens when you hire people who don't understand quality. The crowd of elite women tittered behind their champagne flutes, their red designer outfits creating a crimson wall of privilege around Amara's humiliation. Eleanor Whitfield stepped forward in her scarlet Chanel blazer, her voice carrying the same entitled tone. "Claudia, darling, you're being too kind. In my household, staff who can't perform simple tasks face immediate consequences." She gestured dismissively at Amara. Perhaps she needs a more memorable lesson. James Ashford stood motionless near the auction display, his orange polo shirt and blue jacket making him easily identifiable among the crowd. His silence served as tacit approval for his wife's escalating cruelty. He sipped his wine and nodded along with the other wealthy men who treated the scene as entertainment rather than abuse. "You know what, Eleanor?" Claudia's eyes lit up with malicious inspiration. "You're absolutely right." She snapped her fingers at Amara. "Stop cleaning and look at me when I'm speaking to you." Amara slowly raised her head, maintaining the perfect expression of resigned compliance, while her internal rage burned like molten steel. The bright overhead lighting illuminated every face in the crowd as they leaned forward with anticipation. "There are scraps from the catering on the floor over there." Claudia pointed to a corner where a few breadcrumbs had fallen. "Since you're so incompetent at cleaning, perhaps you'd be better suited to disposal. Crawl over there and clean it up with your mouth." A collective gasp went up from the crowd, followed immediately by excited murmuring. Mrs. Victoria Lancaster, wearing a crimson cocktail dress, clapped her hands together. "Oh my goodness, Claudia, how deliciously wicked of you." The psychological impact hit Amara like a physical blow, but her months of training kicked in automatically. She had endured worse humiliations in other undercover operations, though none had felt this personally degrading. The knowledge that justice was coming kept her focused as she began crawling toward the designated corner. "Wait," called out Margaret Sterling, another donor in a red silk gown. "This is too good to just watch. Why don't we make it interesting? I'll pledge an additional $10,000 to the charity if she actually does it." The suggestion ignited something dark in the crowd's collective psychology. Thomas Blackwood, a real estate mogul in an expensive suit, raised his hand. $15,000 if she barks like a dog first. Claudia's face flushed with excitement at this unexpected turn. "What a marvelous idea. Let's make this a proper auction. What am I bid for additional humiliations?" Her voice carried the practiced cadence of a professional auctioneer, turning human dignity into a commodity. The bidding escalated rapidly as the wealthy donors competed to see who could suggest the most degrading acts. Amara remained frozen in her crawling position, using every ounce of professional control to maintain her cover, while the hidden recording device captured each voice and pledge. $25,000 if she admits she's too stupid to work anywhere else, shouted Patricia Huntington, her red designer dress catching the natural light streaming through the windows. Eleanor Whitfield raised the stakes further. $50,000 if she begs for forgiveness for being such an inadequate servant. The crowd erupted in applause at her contribution, but it was Claudia who delivered the evidence that would ultimately destroy her. Drunk on power and desperate to impress her wealthy peers, she began boasting about her financial superiority. "You know why I can afford to treat my staff however I please?" she announced to the rapt audience. "Because I'm smarter than the government thinks I am. While you're all paying your ridiculous tax rates, I've moved millions offshore. My accountant Gerald Hoffman showed me exactly how to structure the Cayman Island accounts so the IRS would never find them." The crowd listened with fascination as Claudia continued her confession. "Just last month, I transferred another $2 million through the Bermuda shell companies. The beauty is that it's all disguised as charitable donations. These very fundraisers are part of my tax avoidance strategy." James Ashford's orange shirt had begun to show sweat stains as he realized his wife was publicly confessing to federal crimes, but his attempts to signal her to stop went unnoticed. She was too intoxicated by the attention to recognize the danger. "The best part," Claudia continued, gesturing grandly with her champagne glass, "is that people like her," she pointed at Amara, "are too ignorant to understand what they're witnessing. She could overhear every financial conversation in my house and never comprehend the sophistication of our operations." Rosa Delgado stood in the shadows near the service entrance, having returned specifically to witness this event after Amara secretly contacted her. Her face showed pure horror as she watched the systematic dehumanization of another housekeeper. Several other former Ashford employees flanked her, all drawn by the promise that justice was finally coming. The crowd's bloodlust reached fever pitch as additional donors joined the bidding. 100,000 if she cleans the entire ballroom floor with her tongue, called out Benjamin Crawford, his voice carrying across the marble space. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she fought to maintain composure. The months of abuse had taken their toll, and this public humiliation pushed her closer to her psychological breaking point than any previous undercover operation. Only her unwavering commitment to justice and the knowledge that federal agents were positioned nearby kept her from abandoning her cover. Claudia seemed to interpret Amara's trembling as fear rather than rage. "Look how she shakes. This is what happens when people try to work above their station." She addressed the crowd like a lecturer at a university. "Some people are simply born to serve, and it's our responsibility as their betters to remind them of their place." Eleanor Whitfield nodded sagely. "Absolutely correct, darling. And speaking of staying in our proper places, I should mention that my recent financial restructuring has saved me nearly $3 million in taxes this year alone. My Swiss banker practically guarantees government invisibility." The confessions continued flowing like wine, as each wealthy donor attempted to outdo the others with tales of financial crimes. They spoke openly about bribing officials, manipulating charity designations, and coordinating their tax evasion strategies. Every word was captured by Amara's hidden recording equipment and simultaneously transmitted to federal agents monitoring from nearby vehicles. "Now then," Claudia announced, clapping her hands for attention, "let's return to our entertainment. Amara, you will crawl to that corner, consume those scraps, and then thank me publicly for the privilege of serving in my home." The crowd fell silent with anticipation as Amara began moving toward the designated corner, her mind disconnected from the physical humiliation, focusing instead on the comprehensive evidence she had gathered. Months of systematic abuse, dozens of witnessed financial crimes, and now public confessions from multiple conspirators. The case against the Ashford network was airtight. As she reached the corner, Claudia's voice rang out with final triumph. "But first, I think our entertainment has earned a special conclusion. James, call security immediately. I want this woman arrested for theft." James looked confused. "Theft? What did she steal?" "Silver polish went missing from the supply closet yesterday," Claudia announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm certain she took it. A public arrest will complete this evening's demonstration perfectly." The lie was so transparent that even some donors looked uncomfortable. But Claudia was beyond caring about credibility. She wanted total destruction of her victim, and false criminal charges would provide the perfect finale. "Yes, call the police right now," she continued. "I want her arrested in front of everyone here. Let this be a lesson about what happens when people like her try to steal from their betters." Amara remained motionless in the corner, her face pressed close to the marble floor. Inside, quiet satisfaction replaced the burning rage. Claudia had just added false accusations and attempted frame-up to her growing list of federal charges. The recording device captured every word of the fabricated theft story, providing clear evidence of criminal intent. Rosa Delgado stepped slightly forward from her position in the shadows, ready to provide witness testimony that no silver polish had ever gone missing. The other former employees prepared to testify about Claudia's pattern of false accusations against staff members. The crowd buzzed with excitement at this unexpected escalation. They had come to a charity luncheon and instead witnessed what they believed was the complete destruction of a human being. None of them realized they had actually documented their own criminal confessions and provided evidence for the largest tax evasion investigation in the state's history. Claudia stood triumphant in her red dress, surrounded by her wealthy accomplices, completely unaware that federal agents were already moving into position. Her moment of ultimate victory was about to become her final moment of freedom. The natural skylight continued streaming bright daylight across the marble floor, illuminating the scene that would soon be replayed in federal courtrooms. as evidence of systematic abuse and financial crimes. Justice was only moments away. Claudia Ashford's manicured finger pointed directly at Amara Foster, like a weapon aimed at its target. Her red silk dress rustled as she turned to address the crowd of wealthy donors who had just witnessed the most degrading display of power abuse in their collective memory. Security. Claudia's voice cracked with false authority as she gestured dramatically toward Amara Foster, who remained kneeling beside the champagne stain she had been forced to clean repeatedly. "This woman is a thief. I demand she be arrested immediately." The murmur of confused voices rippled through the ballroom as donors exchanged glances. Eleanor Whitfield, resplendent in her red designer blazer, stepped closer to Claudia with obvious excitement at this new development in their twisted entertainment. A thief. Eleanor's voice carried that particular tone. Wealthy women reserved for scandal. How deliciously dramatic, Claudia. What did she steal? Claudia Ashford's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction as she fabricated her story. "I noticed my diamond bracelet missing from the powder room after she cleaned it. $25,000, and now she thinks she can just walk away." Amara Foster slowly raised her head, her expression still maintaining that perfect mask of submission she had worn for 3 excruciating months. Inside, however, she felt something shift. The familiar weight of her concealed recording device pressed against her ribs, having captured every word of this final desperate attempt at destruction. "Please, Mrs. Ashford," Amara said softly, her voice carrying just enough tremor to maintain her cover. "I didn't take anything. You can search me." "Oh, we will," Claudia snarled, her red lips curling into a cruel smile. "And when we find it, I'll make sure you spend the next 10 years in prison, thinking about what happens to people who dare steal from their betters." James Ashford shifted uncomfortably in his orange polo shirt, beads of sweat already forming on his forehead despite the ballroom's comfortable temperature. Something felt wrong about this entire situation, though he couldn't articulate what exactly triggered his unease. The donors began pulling out their phones again, eager to record this new drama. The natural light streaming through the crystal windows caught the gleam of their expensive jewelry as they positioned themselves for the best view of Amara Foster's final humiliation. "Where is security?" Claudia demanded, her voice rising with each word. "I want this woman arrested for grand theft immediately." That's when the ballroom doors burst open. The sound echoed through the space like thunder, causing every head to turn toward the entrance. 6 figures in dark suits moved through the doorway with the precision of a military operation, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Agent Daniel Park led the group, his muscular frame unmistakable even beneath his green dress shirt and blue jacket. His badge gleamed against his chest as he raised it high for everyone to see. "Federal agents." Daniel's voice boomed across the ballroom with absolute authority. "Nobody move." The confusion that followed was immediate and electric. Wealthy donors froze mid-motion, their phones still recording as their expressions shifted from entertainment to alarm. Crystal glasses slipped from manicured fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Claudia Ashford's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "This is a private charity event." Detective Lisa Monroe stepped forward, her long-sleeved blue uniform crisp and professional under the ballroom's overhead lighting. She unfolded a set of papers with deliberate precision. "Claudia Ashford, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit tax evasion, money laundering, and operating an illegal offshore financial scheme." Lisa's voice carried clearly across the silent ballroom. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is impossible," Claudia shrieked, her red dress seeming to pulse with her agitation. "I'm Claudia Ashford. You cannot arrest me." But even as she protested, her eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The federal agents had positioned themselves at every exit with practiced efficiency. Eleanor Whitfield took a careful step backward, her red blazer bright against the neutral colors of the other guests. Her face had gone pale as she calculated her own exposure in whatever investigation had just culminated in this dramatic arrest. "Eleanor," she whispered to herself, then turned toward the side exit, moving as casually as possible. She made it 3 steps before another agent intercepted her path. "Ma'am, I need you to remain where you are," the agent said firmly, his hand moving to his badge. "Eleanor Whitfield, we have some questions for you as well." Eleanor's carefully composed expression cracked completely. "Questions? About what? I don't know what this is about." Meanwhile, James Ashford stood frozen beside the champagne table, his orange shirt now visibly darkened with sweat. His hands trembled as the reality of their situation crashed over him like a wave. 3 months of watching his wife abuse their domestic staff had just transformed into something far more serious than he had ever imagined. "James Ashford," another agent called out, "you're also under arrest in connection with this investigation. I want my lawyer." James managed to stammer, his voice barely audible above the growing chaos in the ballroom. But throughout all of this confusion and panic, one person remained perfectly calm. Amara Foster rose slowly from her kneeling position beside the champagne stain, her movements deliberate and controlled. Her hands moved to the ties of her cleaning apron, and she began to remove it with careful precision. The ballroom fell silent as everyone watched this unexpected development. As the apron fell away, it revealed something that made several donors gasp audibly. Pinned to Amara Foster's red uniform was a federal badge that gleamed under the crystal lighting. "IRS Criminal Investigation Division," Amara announced. Her voice completely transformed from the submissive tone she had maintained for months. Now it carried the full weight of federal authority. The gasps that echoed through the ballroom were audible even over the chaos of the arrests. Wealthy donors stared in shock as they realized the truth of what they had been witnessing. "Agent Amara Foster," she continued, reaching into her uniform to produce a small recording device. "And Mrs. Ashford, thank you for providing such comprehensive evidence of your criminal activities during today's presentation." Claudia Ashford's legs nearly gave out beneath her as the implications crashed over her. "You're a simple maid," Amara finished, her professional smile cold and satisfied. "No, Mrs. Ashford, I'm a federal agent who has spent the last 3 months documenting your extensive tax evasion network, your abuse of domestic staff, and your complete disregard for federal law." She held up the recording device for everyone to see. "Every conversation, every confession, every casual admission of criminal activity has been recorded and will be entered as evidence in your prosecution." The donors who had been laughing and applauding Claudia's cruelty just minutes earlier now scrambled to distance themselves from the scene. Expensive heels clicked against marble as they tried to blend into the crowd, hoping to avoid association with the unfolding disaster. "Your performance today was particularly helpful," Amara continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Forcing me to clean the same spot repeatedly while confessing to moving money through the Cayman Islands, discussing your charity fraud scheme with Mrs. Whitfield, and detailing how you avoid paying taxes on your husband's business income." Claudia's red dress trembled as she shook with rage and fear. "This is entrapment. This is illegal." "Actually," Agent Daniel Park interjected, stepping closer to the group. "Agent Foster's undercover operation was fully authorized and completely legal. Your own voluntary confessions, however, will be extremely helpful in securing your conviction." Detective Lisa Monroe moved behind Claudia with handcuffs, the metal gleaming under the natural light streaming through the windows. "Mrs. Ashford, please place your hands behind your back." "No," Claudia shrieked, attempting to pull away. "I will not be treated like a common criminal. Do you know who I am? You're a tax evader, money launderer, and someone who just provided a ballroom full of witnesses to your character," Amara replied calmly. "And in about 30 seconds, you'll be a federal prisoner." The handcuffs clicked into place with a sound that seemed to echo through the silent ballroom. Claudia Ashford, who had spent the morning humiliating what she thought was a helpless domestic worker, now stood in restraints before the same audience she had sought to impress. Eleanor Whitfield was likewise being restrained. Her red blazer wrinkled as agents secured her hands behind her back. "This is all a misunderstanding," she kept repeating, though her voice lacked any conviction. James Ashford offered no resistance as he was handcuffed, his orange shirt now completely soaked with perspiration. The man who had enabled his wife's cruelty through silent complicity now faced the consequences of that choice. Ladies and gentlemen, Agent Daniel Park addressed the stunned crowd of donors. If you were invited here today, you may be contacted as part of our ongoing investigation into tax evasion among high-net-worth individuals in this city. Several donors paled visibly at this announcement, their expensive jewelry suddenly feeling like targets painted on their backs. Amara Foster surveyed the scene with professional satisfaction. 3 months of enduring daily humiliation, verbal abuse, and psychological torture had led to this moment of complete vindication. The woman who had treated her as less than human now stood in federal custody, facing decades in prison. "Mrs. Ashford," Amara said, as Detective Lisa Monroe prepared to escort the prisoners out, "I hope the entertainment value was worth it." Claudia Ashford's eyes filled with tears of rage and fear as the full scope of her downfall became clear. The same people who had applauded her cruelty now turned away, unwilling to be associated with her disgrace. As the federal agents began leading the prisoners toward the ballroom exits, Amara Foster stood in the center of the space where she had been forced to kneel and clean imaginary stains. The natural light from the crystal windows seemed to illuminate her triumph as justice finally prevailed over wealth and privilege. The tables had indeed turned, and the woman who had wielded power so cruelly discovered that true authority belonged to those who served justice, not those who served only themselves. The crystal chandeliers cast brilliant light across the ballroom as Agent Daniel Park stepped forward, his muscular frame commanding attention in his green-collared shirt and blue jacket. The same wealthy donors who had been laughing and applauding Claudia Ashford's cruelty just moments before now sat frozen in their gilded chairs, their champagne glasses forgotten on white-clothed tables. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel Park's voice cut through the stunned silence. "What you've just witnessed is the conclusion of a 3-month federal investigation into one of the largest tax evasion networks in this city's history." Amara Foster stood tall beside him, her red uniform no longer a symbol of servitude, but a badge of honor. The same woman these elite donors had watched being humiliated now held their fates in her hands. She could feel their shocked stares, see the recognition dawning on faces that had looked through her as if she were invisible furniture. "Every word spoken here today has been recorded," Amara Foster announced, her voice carrying the full authority of her federal position. "Every confession made during what you believed was entertainment has provided us with the evidence we needed to complete Operation Clean Sweep." Claudia Ashford, still handcuffed in her white designer dress, shook her head frantically. "This is impossible. She's just a maid. This has to be some kind of mistake." Detective Lisa Monroe, her long-sleeved blue uniform pressed and professional, stepped forward with additional handcuffs. "Mrs. Ashford, during your public humiliation of Agent Foster, you confessed to maintaining undeclared accounts in the Cayman Islands, admitted to falsifying charity donation records, and boasted about paying 0 federal taxes on income exceeding $20 million annually." The ballroom erupted in whispered panic as donors began calculating their own exposure. Phones appeared as guests frantically tried to contact their attorneys, but additional federal agents positioned at every exit made it clear that no one would be leaving until the investigation was complete. Eleanor Whitfield, resplendent in her red designer blazer, stood abruptly from her table. "I need to leave immediately. I have another engagement." "Mrs. Whitfield?" Agent Daniel Park's voice stopped her mid-stride. "You're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit tax evasion and money laundering." 2 agents flanked Eleanor as Daniel Park continued. "During Agent Foster's months undercover, she documented 17 separate conversations where you detailed your participation in offshore tax avoidance schemes and admitted to hiding assets worth over $8 million. Eleanor's face went pale as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The red blazer that had symbolized her wealth and power now seemed to mark her as another criminal in the expanding web of arrests. James Ashford, his orange shirt now damp with perspiration, pointed an accusing finger at his wife. "This is all Claudia's doing. I just signed the papers she put in front of me. I didn't know anything about the illegal activities." Amara Foster turned her steady gaze on him, and James visibly flinched under her scrutiny. Mr. Ashford, I have recordings of you personally directing the transfer of funds to Swiss accounts, instructing your accountant to falsify records, and threatening to have me deported if I reported any suspicious activities I might witness. That's a lie. James's voice cracked. She's making it up. The ballroom doors opened with dramatic timing as Gerald Hoffman entered, wearing a simple gray suit that contrasted sharply with the designer clothing surrounding him. The accountant's weathered face carried the weight of months of conscience-driven sleepless nights. "I'm afraid it's not a lie, James," Gerald announced, his voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I have copies of every document, every transaction, every illegal transfer you and Claudia authorized over the past 5 years. Claudia's eyes widened in horror as she recognized her former accountant. "Gerald, what are you doing here? We trusted you." "You trusted me to help you steal from the American people," Gerald replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his betrayal of former clients. "I have detailed records of how you funneled money through fake charities, claimed deductions for donations you never made, and established shell corporations to hide income from the IRS. Agent Daniel Park nodded approvingly as Gerald approached. "Mr. Hoffman came forward 6 months ago when his conscience couldn't bear the weight of your crimes any longer. His cooperation allowed us to plan this operation with complete knowledge of your financial networks." The revelation sent another wave of panic through the assembled donors. If their accountant had turned whistleblower, many realized their own financial arrangements might be compromised. Rosa Delgado appeared at the ballroom entrance, her simple black dress dignified under the crystal lighting. Behind her walked 3 other women, all former Ashford household staff members. Their presence transformed the atmosphere as several donors recognized them as people they had also treated as invisible servants. Rosa, Amara Foster's voice, carried genuine warmth as she addressed her fellow housekeeper. "Thank you for coming forward." Rosa stepped into the center of the ballroom, her voice clear and strong. "I worked for the Ashfords for 2 years before I couldn't take the abuse anymore. But it wasn't just the way they treated us. I saw the meetings with men in expensive suits carrying briefcases full of cash. I heard phone calls about moving money to accounts in countries I'd never heard of." One of the other former staff members, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, spoke up. "Mrs. Ashford made us sign papers saying we'd never talk about anything we saw in the house. She said she'd have us arrested if we ever mentioned the visitors or the phone calls. Those non-disclosure agreements have no legal standing when they're used to conceal criminal activity." Detective Lisa Monroe explained to the room. "Every former staff member who was threatened or intimidated is now a witness for the prosecution." The ballroom doors opened again as Attorney General Sandra Pierce made her entrance. Her red blazer commanded immediate attention, and the assembled elite recognized the state's top law enforcement official with collective dread. "Ladies and gentlemen," Attorney General Pierce announced, "this arrest represents the largest tax evasion investigation in our state's history. The evidence gathered by Agent Foster has uncovered a network of wealthy individuals who believed their status placed them above the law." Claudia Ashford, still struggling against her handcuffs, turned desperately toward the Attorney General. "This is a setup. That woman pretended to be something she wasn't. This evidence was gathered illegally." Amara Foster stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I was operating under full federal authority, with proper warrants and judicial oversight. Every conversation was recorded legally. Every document was obtained through legitimate means during my employment in your household." "You lied about who you were," Claudia shrieked. "I was undercover, which is completely legal," Amara Foster replied. "You, however, chose to confess to multiple felonies while publicly humiliating someone you believed had no power to stop you." Attorney General Pierce addressed the room again. "What makes this case particularly egregious is not just the tax evasion, but the systematic abuse of vulnerable workers. Agent Foster endured months of psychological torture while gathering evidence that will ensure justice is served." The media began arriving as word of the spectacular arrests spread throughout the city. Camera crews set up outside the ballroom windows, their bright lights adding to the already brilliant illumination. The same donors who had sought publicity for their charitable giving now frantically covered their faces to avoid being photographed in connection with the investigation. Agent Daniel Park consulted his tablet as additional agents brought him updates. Based on the evidence gathered by Agent Foster and corroborated by Mr. Hoffman's records, we have probable cause to arrest 12 additional individuals present at this event. The announcement sent several guests into panic as they realized their own financial crimes had been exposed. Some attempted to flee toward service exits, only to find federal agents waiting for them. James Ashford made one final desperate attempt to save himself. "I'll cooperate completely. I'll testify against everyone. Just please, I was manipulated by my wife." Claudia turned on him with fury that matched her earlier cruelty toward Amara Foster. "How dare you? This was your idea. You're the one who said we deserved to keep our money instead of giving it to the government. And now you're both on record, admitting to conspiracy and tax evasion." Detective Lisa Monroe observed dryly as she made notes on her tablet. Amara Foster watched the chaos with professional satisfaction. Every instance of abuse she had endured, every moment of humiliation she had suffered, had led to this moment of complete justice. The same people who had laughed at her degradation now faced the consequences of their own criminal behavior. Attorney General Pierce approached Amara Foster with evident respect. "Agent Foster, your sacrifice and dedication have exposed corruption that extends far beyond simple tax evasion. The evidence you gathered has implicated judges, politicians, and business leaders in a network of financial crimes that we're only beginning to unravel." "It was worth every moment," Amara Foster replied, her voice carrying quiet satisfaction. "These people believed their wealth made them untouchable. They treated workers like property and stole from every honest taxpayer in America." The camera crews outside had managed to capture footage through the ballroom windows, and the images of wealthy socialites in handcuffs were already spreading across social media. The charity luncheon that was supposed to celebrate their generosity had instead become documentation of their criminal exposure. Gerald Hoffman approached Amara Foster as the arrests continued around them. "I want you to know how much I admire what you did. When I realized the scope of their crimes, I knew someone had to stop them, but I never imagined anyone would have the courage to endure what you went through. Someone had to hold them accountable." Amara Foster replied simply, "Their money and status shouldn't protect them from justice." As the last of the arrested donors were led away in handcuffs, the empty ballroom stood as silent testimony to the spectacular fall of the city's corrupt elite. The crystal chandeliers still cast their brilliant light, but now they illuminated justice served rather than injustice ignored. The operation that had begun with Amara Foster's decision to endure systematic abuse for the greater good had concluded with the largest tax evasion bust in state history. The woman they had treated as invisible had proven to be their ultimate downfall. 6 months after that fateful charity luncheon, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the federal courthouse, casting long rectangles of natural light across the polished marble floors. The bright fluorescent fixtures overhead ensured every corner of courtroom 4A remained clearly illuminated as history prepared to unfold. Amara Foster adjusted her professional green blazer over her navy slacks, feeling the weight of months of preparation settling on her shoulders. Today wasn't just about sentences and verdicts. Today was about vindication for every moment of humiliation she had endured, every cruel word she had absorbed, every degrading task she had performed while building the case that would bring down one of the city's most corrupt networks. Judge Kevin Wallace, a distinguished man in his 60s with graying temples, entered the courtroom with the gravity befitting this momentous day. The gallery was packed with reporters, federal agents, former household staff, and curious onlookers who had followed the case since the dramatic arrests at the charity luncheon. The bright courthouse lighting left no shadows for anyone to hide in. The United States versus Claudia Ashford, Eleanor Whitfield, and James Ashford, Judge Wallace announced, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "We are here today for sentencing in what has become the largest tax evasion investigation in this state's history." Claudia Ashford sat at the defendant's table, a far cry from the imperious socialite who had once forced Amara to clean imaginary spots from marble floors. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a simple orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a basic ponytail. The woman who had once commanded rooms full of wealthy donors now stared at her hands, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Attorney General Sandra Pierce rose from her seat, her red suit a stark contrast to Claudia's prison attire. Her muscular frame and confident bearing commanded immediate attention as she addressed the court. Your Honor, the evidence presented in this case represents not just financial crimes, but a pattern of psychological abuse, exploitation, and contempt for the very laws that bind our society together. Amara felt her heart rate increase as Judge Wallace called her to the witness stand for her victim impact statement. The bright overhead lighting seemed to spotlight her journey from the shadows of that mansion to this moment of truth. She placed her hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth she had been gathering for months. Agent Foster, Judge Wallace said respectfully, please tell the court about your experience during Operation Clean Sweep. Amara's voice was steady as she began. Your Honor, for 3 months, I lived a double life. By day, I endured systematic psychological abuse from Claudia Ashford, who treated me as less than human. By night, I documented evidence of crimes that defrauded American taxpayers of over $50 million. She turned to face Claudia directly, the bright courthouse lighting illuminating the stark difference between them now. Mrs. Ashford forced me to eat scraps from the floor. She made me re-clean surfaces that were already spotless. She threatened me with deportation despite knowing I was American-born. She did all of this not out of any reasonable expectation of cleanliness or service, but because she enjoyed wielding power over someone she perceived as powerless. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft scratch of reporters' pens and the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above. Amara continued, her professional training evident in every measured word. What Mrs. Ashford didn't realize was that every moment of cruelty, every confession she made while treating me as invisible furniture, every detail she shared about offshore accounts and money laundering schemes was being carefully documented. Her assumption that I was unintelligent because of my race and employment position led her to discuss federal crimes in my presence, as if I weren't even human. Judge Wallace nodded gravely. Agent Foster, can you describe the psychological impact of maintaining your cover while enduring this treatment? Amara took a deep breath, the bright lighting making her composed expression clearly visible to everyone in the courtroom. Your Honor, there were moments when the humiliation felt unbearable. When she forced me to clean champagne drops while her wealthy friends laughed. When she made me scrub floors with a toothbrush for their entertainment. When she described me as good breeding stock to her dinner guests. I had to remind myself that every second of that abuse was building toward this moment of justice. The impact of her words rippled through the courtroom. Several reporters looked up from their notebooks, clearly moved by the testimony. In the gallery, Rosa Delgado and 3 other former household staff members nodded in recognition of their own similar experiences. The hardest part, Amara continued, wasn't the physical demands or even the verbal abuse. It was maintaining my cover while watching her commit federal crimes and knowing that if I broke character for even a moment, months of work would be lost and she would continue victimizing others. Attorney General Pierce approached the witness stand, her red suit catching the bright courtroom lighting. Agent Foster, can you tell the court what your investigation ultimately uncovered? Amara's professional demeanor sharpened as she shifted into her federal agent role. The Ashford Network was operating a sophisticated tax evasion scheme involving shell companies in 7 countries, fraudulent charity donations, and money laundering through art purchases and real estate transactions. The total amount of evaded federal taxes exceeds $52 million. Additionally, we documented a pattern of labor law violations, including failure to pay overtime wages to household staff and maintaining unsafe working conditions. She paused, ensuring her next words carried maximum impact. Most significantly, Mrs. Ashford's own recorded confessions during the charity luncheon provided irrefutable evidence of intent and conspiracy. While she was publicly humiliating me for the entertainment of her wealthy friends, she was simultaneously detailing her criminal activities in enough depth to satisfy every element of the federal charges against her. Judge Wallace thanked Amara for her testimony, and she returned to her seat, feeling the weight of months of hidden truth finally being acknowledged in the bright light of justice. The court then heard from Rosa Delgado, who wore a simple blue dress as she testified about her own experiences working for the Ashford family. Mrs. Ashford fired me when she suspected I had overheard Mr. James meeting with men she called financial consultants. I later learned these were money launderers. She threatened to have me deported and blacklisted from domestic work if I ever spoke about what I witnessed. 3 more former staff members provided similar testimony, painting a clear picture of the Ashford family's pattern of abuse and intimidation. The bright courthouse lighting seemed to expose every detail of their suffering, no longer hidden in the shadows of that mansion. Eleanor Whitfield was sentenced first. Judge Wallace's voice was firm as he addressed her. Mrs. Whitfield, your participation in this conspiracy and your encouragement of the psychological abuse witnessed at the charity luncheon demonstrate a callous disregard for both federal law and basic human dignity. I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation and full restitution of evaded taxes plus penalties. James Ashford received a reduced sentence of 5 years due to his cooperation with prosecutors, but Judge Wallace's words carried sharp rebuke. Mr. Ashford, your silent complicity in both the financial crimes and the abuse of household staff makes you equally culpable in this conspiracy. Your cooperation with investigators, while noted, cannot excuse years of enabling behavior. Finally, Judge Wallace turned to Claudia Ashford. The woman who had once commanded the social hierarchy of the city's elite now stood trembling in her orange jumpsuit under the bright fluorescent lights that left no corner of the courtroom in shadow. Claudia Ashford, Judge Wallace began, his voice carrying the full weight of federal authority. You have been found guilty of tax evasion, money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and violation of federal labor laws. The evidence against you includes not only financial records and testimony from co-conspirators, but your own recorded confessions made while you were psychologically torturing a federal agent. The judge paused, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle over the silent courtroom. Your treatment of Agent Foster and other household staff reveals a character so lacking in basic human empathy that it calls into question your fitness to participate in civilized society. You treated a decorated federal agent like property, forced her to endure degrading abuse for your entertainment, and did so while openly confessing to federal crimes because you assumed her race and employment position made her intellectually inferior. Claudia's legs seemed to give out, and she gripped the defendant's table for support as Judge Wallace continued. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You will pay full restitution of all evaded taxes, penalties, and interest, totaling approximately $73 million. Additionally, you are permanently barred from serving on any charitable organization's board and from employing domestic staff without federal oversight. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap, officially closing the chapter on the Ashford family's reign of abuse and criminal behavior. As court adjourned, Attorney General Pierce approached Amara in the bright courthouse corridor. Agent Foster, I want to personally commend your exceptional service. Your work on Operation Clean Sweep has led to the largest tax evasion bust in state history and resulted in 47 additional arrests among the wealthy elite who were part of this network. Agent Daniel Park joined them, his green shirt and blue jacket as crisp as ever, his muscular frame radiating pride in his protege. Amara, it's my honor to inform you that you're being promoted to Senior Special Agent in the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. You'll be leading a new task force focused on investigating tax evasion among high-net-worth individuals who exploit domestic workers. 3 weeks later, Amara stood before a group of 30 young people at the Riverside Community Center, a facility that had been renovated using recovered funds from the Ashford investigation. The afternoon sunlight streamed through large windows, while overhead fluorescent lights ensured every face in the room was clearly visible. She wore her green blazer and navy slacks, but her demeanor was warm and approachable as she addressed the diverse group of teenagers and young adults who had gathered to hear her speak. 6 months ago, Amara began, I was pretending to be a housekeeper, while rich people treated me like I wasn't even human. They assumed that because of my race and my job, I couldn't possibly be intelligent enough to understand their conversations about million-dollar crimes. A young black woman in the front row raised her hand. Weren't you scared they would figure out who you really were? Amara smiled. Every single day. But I want you to understand something important. The fear of being discovered wasn't nearly as powerful as my commitment to justice. Every time Claudia Ashford forced me to scrub floors with a toothbrush, every time she made me eat scraps while her friends laughed, I reminded myself that I was gathering evidence that would protect future victims and recover money stolen from taxpayers like your families. A young man in the back called out, "What if we face discrimination, but we're not undercover agents? How do we fight back?" That's the most important question you could ask. Amara replied, her voice carrying the authority she had earned through months of silent endurance and patient investigation. You fight back by being excellent at whatever you choose to do. You fight back by never accepting that someone else's prejudice defines your worth. You fight back by understanding that justice sometimes takes time, but it's worth waiting for and working toward. She gestured to the renovated community center around them. Its bright lighting, illuminating new computers, updated furniture, and educational resources. This center exists because we held wealthy criminals accountable for their actions. The after-school programs, the job training courses, the college prep classes, all of this is funded by money that was stolen from your community and returned through the justice system. As her speech concluded, Amara felt the final emotional beat of her long journey settling into place. The humiliation had been transformed into vindication. The abuse had been converted into justice. The months of silent endurance had become a story of hope that would inspire others to persevere through their own challenges. Remember, she told the young faces looking up at her in the bright community center lighting. Justice isn't always immediate, but it's always worth fighting for. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you choose to respond when faced with injustice. The applause that followed seemed to echo not just through the community center, but through every moment of her undercover ordeal, validating every second of abuse she had endured to reach this moment of inspirational hope. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.